So I was like, okay, something is working for me. Let me just share with people how I'm doing this, and maybe it'll work for them too.
All right, awesome. So today I am joined with professional composer Cheska Navarro, who has scored over 20 projects, including 2 feature films, and she was the winner of the 2022 Berlin Short Awards Festival Best Original Score Award. And recently, you've been making a lot of waves on social media, teaching other composers how to break into the industry, right? And how to find work by building connections with other filmmakers. Right. So welcome to the show. So welcome to the show.
I'm like, yeah, that's me, I
So,
think.
yeah. So I'm still getting used to this. You're the first interview on the podcast, so I'm still getting a little used to this. So there'll be a little bit of bumpy, but we'll make the most of it. So to kind of break the ice, I first found your Instagram page. I want to say like a year and a half ago. And what really drew me to like be a follower and to really be invested in like your journey and all the information that you're sharing was finding out that you also don't have really the traditional background in music. Like you didn't really start pursuing music until 2019, isn't that right?
Mhm.
Right, awesome. And you had like a background in science. So,
Yep.
so how did you navigate that? How did you navigate that transition?
Yeah, it was kind of weird because when you're in science, there's kind of like a methodical way to go about mastering a subject and like applying it. And it felt like creativity was kind of this chaotic process that was so different from my background where everything was laid out for you, like someone had done the research like hundreds of years ago and all you had to do was like look in your book and take the quiz and get certified and blah blah blah. It felt like I didn't really understand how much entrepreneurship like played a role in creating my career. And I was like, oh, I can't just make music and be good at it and like bada bing bada boom, like your career just happens. Like it was kind of a challenge to realize like, oh shoot, like there's all these skills that I need to learn if I want to make money doing this.
Yes.
And thankfully there's like a lot of resources now on YouTube, like Zach Heidi, one
Yeah.
of my
Oh,
favorite
I love
resources.
Zach. Yeah.
Yeah, Zach. And then also the future, Chris Do, like in the creative space in general, but more
Mm-hmm.
so for like designers. I learned a lot from him. And I basically kind of DIY'd my education to be able to get to where I am now. And a lot of it had to do with putting myself out there on social media and overcoming like the mental blocks that kept me from, you know, being okay in my own skin and like showing it to people. For the longest time, I was the kind of person who would like hold back their true opinion in order to fit in. Like if someone was like, "Oh, like this movie was really cool. What do you think, Cheska?" And I would be like, "Oh yeah, that was a cool movie." But then deep down inside, I'd be like, "I don't like that movie." So I had to like embrace who I was, even if it wasn't what everyone else was doing. And like to an extent, I still like kind of struggle with that, but I feel more comfortable now as a composer. I feel more like myself than when I was a scientist because it just felt like this never-ending game of like pleasing people, playing like the office politics game, and I just didn't like that.
Right? I mean, there's just so much they have to navigate. Like, no matter what career option you choose. This is something that because I also was in a wildly different career path before I decided on music. I kind of stumbled my way into music, but there's always politics. There's always different challenges you have to navigate. If you're not passionate about that line of work, it makes it so much more draining, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you try to transit, well, like, at least for me, transitioning from therapy into music, the imposter syndrome was insane. Like,
Yes.
because you were talking about like having to change your opinions on certain movies, or like hide your real opinions on what or saying things that you think you're supposed to be saying. And
Mm-hmm.
that was like the biggest issue for me. Like, especially starting off, especially putting yourself on Instagram. All right, Instagram and YouTube, there's the expectation that you're supposed to be like an expert or whatever. And if you're not an expert, why are you making the content? And so that was something that took a while to get over. Where people, I would get questions like, even recently, I got asked on a live stream if I thought Bartok, as the classical composer, whatever year composer he was effective at composing angry, rageful music. I had to admit, I was like, I don't know a lot of his music. Or like my most recent soundtrack, like I worked on a musical, and I love musicals. I'm a nerd for musicals, but I'm definitely a noob. Definitely like a vanilla type musical person. Like I like Phantom, Wicked, all that kind of stuff. And so when I'm working with all of these directors and these writers, and they're all talking about all of these musicals that they've seen and all these plays that they've studied, I'm sitting there going like, oh, I've never heard of these.
Mhm.
And it just, yeah, the imposter syndrome is insane. And you've talked about on your channel how you've navigated kind of blending and playing to your strengths as being a former scientist into music. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? How did you manage that transition? What strengths did you bring over with you from being in like a non-artistic field first?
I feel like my habit of taking detailed notes on things that really interest me came in like to play with my social media. I also really liked the spirit of scientists like Leonardo da Vinci, where he would kind of just like get obsessed with one thing and then just like document it like crazy. And I'm pretty sure if he had social media, he might have like just posted like wildly different topics all the time. But in my mind, I was like, okay, in the world of science, if you discover something and it works or the result is like interesting, the right thing to do would be to share what you found with other
Yes.
scientists and then have them repeat your experiment with the same exact like conditions and see if like is this thing an actual thing or is it just a fluke. And for me that thing was getting my first jobs like through Instagram, specifically by like going to crowdfunding sites, going to where filmmakers were, and then just like looking them up on Google, looking them up on Instagram, and like DMing them. That process, I was like, there's no way that this is like just me, right? There has to be thousands of composers doing this exact same thing. And I tried to look this up in like forums. I tried to look up YouTube videos about how to get work. And I was just super unsatisfied with like all of those videos because it felt so vague. And as
Yes.
a scientist, I was like, I need something specific. I need something that someone has repeated over across like, tons of different people have tried this. Like I want something with validation, like something that has gone through several composers. And I was just like, what does break into the industry and build good relationships mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. So I was like, okay, something is working for me. Let me just share with people how I'm doing this, and maybe it'll work for them too. And there was like this thought that I had before I like made kind of like that first post sharing what I had been doing. And part of me was like, if I kept this a secret, would I get more jobs than everyone
Right?
else? Like would I just like, have this foothold in this part of the industry? And I was like, that's kind of a ridiculous thought. Like even if I did keep that to myself, it would be physically impossible to, claim every single gig on like a scale where it was so like no
Yep.
one could compete against
Mm-hmm.
me anymore. It was just like a silly thought. I was like, I don't want to be that person. I want to be the person that people can be like, hey, she made it. I can make it too. And I don't need to have this background or this education or this like connection into the industry. And I was like, yeah, like let's just do it. So kind
Yes.
of a whirlwind. And I just kept going. And I found that things that I studied as a scientist were like inextricably linked to the
Mm-hmm.
way I approached composing and like creating. And one of the posts I'm really proud of was this idea taken from the precision versus accuracy graphs that like people will study in school. And yeah, I don't have to like explain the whole post, but it was just like I felt like for once in my life I had something new and different. And I realized like maybe the only other scientist composer that I know of is probably Benjamin Franklin because apparently he tried to write a
Really?
drinking song or something. there's like a silly YouTube video of his string quartet with like really bad voice leading, and it's like that's like
I love that. I didn't know that.
yeah.
But I mean, I love, because I'm sorry, I tend to trip over myself when I get excited. But I love that explanation that you had of sharing the data to see if it can be replicated. Because that is something, I don't know if you run into the same issue, but being an outsider to music, or feeling like an outsider from music and coming in, the gatekeeping is so insane.
Yeah.
Every little piece of data is behind a paywall, or it's behind, or people don't want to share it because there's the idea that if you get that job, that's one job I didn't get. And I remember
Mhm.
talking with Zach about this, and we were saying that the YouTube composers just tend to be a completely different animal. That I don't know whether it's something about YouTube that attracts people with this type of personality, or whether it's being having a start on YouTube helps you develop the personality, but the idea that you want to share. That when you discover something crazy awesome that's helped you, you want to share it so that other people can try it too. It's almost kind of the opposite of gatekeeping. You want to share all that data to see, can the results be replicated, right?
Mhm.
And that's something I try to do on my channel as well. Because my biggest thing that I brought over from being therapy was just my understanding of how emotions can be described and translated into music. And that's something that I try to do a live stream every Friday. And I like to, then recently the streams have just been about composing different types of emotions voted by my subscribers. And it's a lot of fun building that community and sharing the data with people and sharing that method and seeing what they can come up with using the same methods. So we've kind of danced around it a little bit, but I'd like to see if you can go a bit deeper into your process. So
Mhm.
you mentioned that your big breakthrough was discovering the crowdfunding websites, and this is the one that I really brought you to my attention, because to my knowledge, you're the first person to ever come up with this idea. And once you started putting it out there, it just exploded everywhere, and everyone started making these connections. Like, oh, that makes sense. That just posting my own music isn't going to actually get me noticed. It's about actually going out there and finding people. But can you, for people who maybe haven't found your page yet or don't know what your process is, do you mind diving in a bit deeper into that?
Yeah. So I generally think of four places to find filmmakers online. The first would be crowdfunding sites, so like Indiegogo, Kickstarter, Seed and Spark, and like a few other off-brand
Yeah.
ones, if you will. Um, and the idea is you would go on this website and go filmmaker shopping and focus on someone that you really resonate with, or maybe you have a lot in common with, or maybe like the story they're telling just resonates with you. I think that gives you an edge over composers who are just going through the motions and trying to DM, email as many filmmakers as possible. So instead of playing the numbers game, I wanted to play the quality game, like the human relationship game. And it kind of resembles online dating in the sense that there's going to be a lot of like swipe lefts before you get to the swipe rights. And so in the beginning, I was a little bit desperate for anything. So after I did like, my first 5 gigs and I realized, what kind of filmmakers do I like working with? What type of films do I like doing personally? Where does my music fit the best? I started to focus on more specific kind of filmmakers and films. So if you're someone who loves sci-fi, but you're not so good at like the drama rom-com scoring, maybe you just focus on directors who are nerds for Star Wars and like, that kind of thing. It's a very specific person who's going to make that kind of film. So I would do that and like basically go through the crowdfunding page and see if I can learn about the filmmaker from there. Usually they'll like link to their website or to like an Instagram dedicated to the film. And from there, it's actually pretty straightforward. You can easily find the filmmaker through Instagram. They're either going to like tag or be following the account. And from there, it's mainly like contacting the filmmaker and just approaching them as like a normal human being with hopes and dreams and like insecurities who has no idea who you are. You're a total stranger. And just, you know, writing them a message that you would want to open yourself. So for me, like the way that I like to do it is if they have previous work, to go and find their previous films, watch it, see if I like it. And if there is something that catches my eye, I'm going to message them and let them know, like, hey, like, I just saw your film, blah, 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 really liked it. And from there, you can build up a relationship with like conversation, or like if you've been posting content, they might see what you do, and there's no need to explain you're a composer. They're just gonna be like, who's this person? And then they'll be like, oh, you're a film composer. I'm working on a film. And you don't have to say that you found their crowdfunding page, but there's just like so many ways of like navigating this first step of reaching out to the filmmaker that I've like kind of formulated a whole process on that, which is kind of like a lot to go into. But basically, it's just all about connecting with them the way that you would want to be approached. And usually that means not spamming them with your portfolio, not saying like, hey, do you need a composer like as your first sentence? Like that's just a recipe for being ignored.
Yeah.
And then over time, as you get your first gigs and everything, the work that you get will be more like word of mouth and through like mutual contacts. And so this is why Instagram is still so important to me, even though I don't go on crowdfunding sites anymore. I have proof that I have a connection to a director I've worked with, not only like in IMDb credits, but through the fact that we follow each other. So if there's like a filmmaker I encounter who is friends with my director, but we don't know each other yet, they're going to be able to see that me and my director follow each other. And so there's that like social proof like built in that I have a connection to this person. And also it's just more convenient to like send people to your Instagram rather than send them to a website,
Mm-hmm.
because on the website there's this expectation that you're putting on your best self and like trying to impress and be professional, but people don't choose to work with people because they're the most professional. They choose to work with people because it was enjoyable, they got the result they wanted, and it was easy and fun, hopefully. So yeah, that's like crowdfunding sites. The other three would be YouTube, Vimeo, and then like filmmaker collectives or like nonprofit community organizations. With YouTube, I've experimented with following indie filmmakers who usually make content about filmmaking, but also make their own independent like short films, feature films on the side. And that relationship can't really happen on YouTube because there is no instant messaging feature
Mm-hmm.
or like semi real time like feed where you can follow each other's day like on Instagram stories. So I would do the same exact thing, like see if I can watch the films from this filmmaker. And if I can't find a film from them, I'll actually make my first message to them on Instagram asking if I can watch their work. And sometimes they will send you a private link where you can then watch it and then like share your thoughts with them. So YouTube is really great actually because you have to film yourself to make
Yeah.
content. It's baked into it. Not every filmmaker is going to be a content creator though. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like between YouTube and Instagram, Instagram is still like the best place to develop that relationship because the production time is not as high as like a YouTube video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Personally, I prefer YouTube. For whatever reason, it comes easier to me than Instagram.
Use it to your advantage. Like honestly, I was talking to one of my students today, and I told him to try and teach his YouTube algorithm to think he was a filmmaker, so that it would like just give him random filmmakers like every time he was on YouTube. And it's gone to a point where it just gives him like short films and like sometimes feature films from like small YouTube channels to like bigger YouTube channels with like thousands and thousands of views and a million followers. And he told me he was able to like go and contact them on Instagram, and that it's just awesome opening up your YouTube and seeing all these filmmakers on your page.
That's a really good idea. I gotta try that.
Yeah, I would suggest like typing out like cinematic vlogs or short films and then changing the filter so that it gives you the most recent content, like within the
Okay.
last 24 hours, whatever the shortest thing is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of people who are, since the pandemic, kind of realized like, oh, I don't want to do this boring job anymore. I want to pursue my
Yes.
passion. And then, life
Oh,
changed.
yes. I've gotten so many people messaging me that. I think like it. I'm curious to see if it's the same with you. But I get so many people approach me specifically because I don't have a background in music. I get a lot of people who like find me like, oh, you transitioned from like therapy to music. I'm trying to go from like computer software, or I got one guy in Germany that I'm working with right now, who is a software engineer, and he's trying to transition into music. And so it's just kind of cool seeing a lot of people, especially because, like you said, the pandemic changed things. You don't have to be in LA anymore to be involved in films. Not that you really ever had to, but now a lot more people realize you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's a cool time. You made a post recently about how it's never been a better time to be a filmmaker, and I completely agree. Especially since
Mm-hmm.
we're on like the rise of the indie studios, like the downfall of the big studios and the rise of the indie artists, which is really
Mm-hmm.
cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see
Yeah.
what happens. So let me see if I can summarize all this to make sure I'm following it right. Right. So it sounds to me like your entire approach is very much relationships focused. All right. Whereas the traditional method that's like taught at like Berkeley and like a lot of the older existing classes was cold emails. You find people who are doing work, you just send out emails saying, here's my work, here's what I can do. What do you need? I can do this. I'm a composer. But there are so many composers out there. So what you're recommending is to start by finding filmmakers that you think you could generally have a good working relationship with. So
Mm-hmm.
start by like crowdfunding websites, things like Kickstarter or GoFundMe. Look for short films or feature films that are looking for funding, that they describe their film, they describe their project, they describe their vision. And usually those websites will have links to Instagram. I find it's typically the same with YouTube. YouTube with people, I really, really like that idea of finding filmmakers who are already sharing stuff on YouTube, like tutorials. Because I
Mm-hmm.
just tend to mesh well with people who do tutorials for whatever reason. I find if you're willing to do tutorials, then you're probably pretty nerdy and you love geeking out about your line of work. And that
Yeah,
works
that's a
really
good.
well for me,
Yeah.
right? So you find filmmakers whose work you already admire, whose mission you align yourself with, and then you just reach out. All right, you reach out and you say, "Hey, I'm so and so. I admire your work. Um, I'm looking forward to this next film, or I'm looking forward to whatever." You just basically try to start a bit of like an online relationship with the person. I like that. I like that analogy you used of like the online dating, like that speed dating, and trying to find just like create a quick friendship. And then once you find someone that you like, and you form the relationship first, then you can tend to find opportunities to collaborate with each other down the line. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense? Is like, did I get everything right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Awesome. And I love that approach because I'm sure you've had this experience too, but not all collaborators are equal or equally enjoyable. Especially for whatever reason. I've been told that it's because music is the one part of like filmmaking or like theater
Yeah.
that directors don't know a lot about. And I've had collaborations where it's very much you're dictated to. You're like, all right, music starts here, music ends here. These are the spots you hit. This is the mood you hit. And there's just not a lot of room for creativity. But then my favorite collaborator, my friend Darius, he's a playwright, and he and I have done 3 plays together. And one of the reasons why we work so well together is because we both have a very deep love of storytelling. And so we'll have 3 4 hour conversations late into the night just talking about the story and talking about what we think the music can do to contribute to it. And so he's the kind of person that I would leap at the opportunity to do another project with. Whereas there are other people who are wonderful people, great people, and if I'm if my schedule is empty, I wouldn't mind working with them again. But if I have other alternatives, like we didn't really mesh too well. And focusing on that kind of relationship aspect of things, I think, helps set you up for much better experiences, where you can actually grow and develop as a composer as well. Because that's a really important part of the job, is being able to grow and explore. I know you've been experimenting with a lot more with electronic music, haven't you? I've been seeing that on Instagram,
Yeah,
right?
I've been waiting for like a film project to get back to me for like my part to add on to it. So I've just been exploring my interests.
Right? And I love it. I haven't had a project. Well, I've done a little bit of sound design in a couple of my projects, but nothing crazy in electronic. And I really want to. I don't think I'm good at it yet, but I want to try it because of Dune and Spider-Verse. Those movies have, oh, I've seen them so many times. So I really want to work on something a lot more electronic. But I'm sure it'll come in the future. And I'm looking forward to using a lot of your methods to actually try to explore and see if I can find new collaborators, right?
Yeah.
So, just to kind of wrap things up, do if there are is there if there are specific steps you would recommend that the listeners take right now, like if they finish the podcast, of course, and then they finish that first and then they go on with their day, what are some things that you think they should do right now today to make sure that they can immediately start taking action on this and trying to find collaborators to build relationships with?
Yeah, I would say crowdfunding sites are the best place to
Mm-hmm.
start, especially around this time of year because of student films and the weather's
Yeah.
good, so people are filming. Um, so I would go on there. It could be on your phone, and then just scroll through and use your instincts to pick films to pursue. So if the quality of like a thumbnail kind of bothers you and to you that signals like, ooh, horror short film, like low budget, no thanks. Just
Yeah.
keep going. And eventually you'll stumble upon something, and you'll basically just look for an Instagram link or the name of the director, copy paste that into Instagram, and then from there, you're going to look for a message button. And this allows you to approach the filmmaker without having to follow them. And of course, it's kind of awkward if you follow them to message them and then it doesn't go through and you unfollow them. Like it's
Yeah.
just kind of fun. So
Yeah.
just like take your time and look for people who are approachable, whose accounts are public, who want to be contacted, and then ask them if you can watch their previous work, or you can do a short little introduction saying that you really love the story in their film and that you happen to be a composer and you would love to contribute to the project. Like keyword is contribute to the
Yes.
project, not I want a job. Like, oh, do you need a composer? So yeah, you can do that in like the span of 10 minutes. You can do it sitting on the toilet while waiting for an appointment. You can do it
Yeah.
wherever.
You don't have the bus anywhere with signal, right? All right.
Yeah.
So head out 10 minutes a day, basically. Check YouTube, check crowdfunding websites. Look, basically make a list of people you can reach out to and try to find some people, right? All
Mhm.
right. Awesome. So where can people follow you? How can they learn more about your process? Do you have anything you want to plug? Anything? I know you've got a new class that you just created.
Yeah, I have a class called the Gig Hunting Kit, and it's a summary of everything I've learned navigating this whole world of like Instagram and getting gigs. And it comes with 4 one-to-one sessions built in because accountability is such a big part of what I do and want to provide to people. I know it's easier said than done to go and do these things. So that's available. And I'm on YouTube and Instagram at Cheska underscore yo. Cheska underscore yo. And I also do one-to-one coaching sessions with anyone who wants to learn how to do film scoring the way that I do film scoring. And also anyone who wants to start posting on Instagram or needs more help, like getting their first gigs.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so very much for being part of the podcast and looking forward to hopefully having you on again in the future. All right.
Yeah, no
Uh,
problem. This was fun.
yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Steve.
you.